Hello and welcome to All Indians Matter in-depth limited series. I am Ashraf Engineer. Last year, as part of this podcast's annual Gandhi series, we detailed the Mahatma's final years and how pivotal they were not just to India's birth but also to the journey the country has travelled since then. I had said then that a study of Gandhi's last years is important to understand why India took the path that it did and to set right so many of the claims being made about him now. The series Gandhi The Final Years offered a study of how one of the most charismatic and effective mass leaders the world has seen became the lonely pilgrim that he was when he was shot dead. This year, we flip the thought by going back to the start. This series, Gandhi the Beginning, will trace the early years of the Mahatma, starting with his grandfather and father, both great influences on his personality. The family's journey, Gandhi's mother Putliba, his early years, going all the way till the young boy from Porbandar turned into a political personality with his first political legal battle in South Africa. From this, we will try to understand the making of Gandhi, the mass leader and father of the nation. At every point, our hope is that the conversation is contemporary, linked to present day issues and debates. We want to peel away the layers of Gandhi's persona to understand how he became the man that we all know. As every year, we have as a guide through our journey Tushar Gandhi, great grandson of the Mahatma, an author and peace activist. Tushar has written the extraordinary book Let's Kill Gandhi, a chronicle of the conspiracy to assassinate the Mahatma. He's also written The Lost Diary of Kasturba Ba, translating a notebook he found forgotten and worn at the Kasturba Ashram in Indore. We've done special series around both, and my hope is we can have such a conversation every year because Gandhi's life is like the universe. No matter how deep we explore, a lot will remain to be found and understood. For this series, I have relied on volume 1 of Gandhi's biography written by his secretary Pyarelal. It is called Mahatma Gandhi, The Early Phase. It is exhaustively compiled, exquisitely rich in detail, and superbly written. So visual is the writing that you feel as if you are viewing the places, people, and events described. As a writer, I couldn't help but marvel at the mastery of structure, simplicity of writing, and dedication to the purpose. It made my job very easy. All I had to do was open the book and the story streamed out. Pyarelal ji is no longer with us, but this series is as much a tribute to his labor of love as it is to Gandhi. Our story begins in Kathiawad, also known as Saurashtra. It is a land steeped in mythology and history. It is said that Lord Krishna settled here after his flight from Mathura and established the city of Dwarka, which is today a pilgrimage center. Kathiawad also gave us two of India's most famous sons, Gandhi and Swami Dayananda Saraswati, who founded one of the three great Hindu reformist movements, the Arya Samaj. Kathiawad is a peninsula jutting into the Arabian Sea and is about 61,000 square kilometers in area. It is bound by the Gulf of Kutch in the northwest and by the Gulf of Khambat in the east. According to the Mahabharata, the Yadavs ruled the entire region between Prabhapatan, which is home to the famous Somnath temple, and the Girnar hill just beyond Porbandar. At some stage, they earned the wrath and curse of Lord Krishna, eventually killing themselves in a drunken brawl. From this, we get the term Yadavi, which means fratricidal strife. Gandhi often used to tell this tale in his final days, warning that this is what would happen to India if ethnic fires were not doused. The region has been home to a galaxy of saints and devotees, one of whom was Narasimha Mehta, also known as the friend of the untouchables, and who composed Gandhi's favorite hymn, Vaishnava Jana. Kathiawad housed major shipyards, and the vessels built here sailed as far as Singapore and Java in the east and Arabia and Zanzibar in the west. The first Muslim invasion of Kathiawad was in the 11th century when Mahmud of Ghazni sacked Somnath. From the 14th century, the region had a series of Muslim rulers which left a permanent stamp on the language and culture. About 40% of the words of the Kathiawadi dialect are said to be of Arabic and Persian origin. Alongside, there are also Zoroastrian, Christian, and Sufi influences, all of which intermingled to form a culture of tolerance. In Porbandar, for instance, there used to be a Haveli in which the name of Allah was chanted along with that of Ishwar and Ram with Rahims. It is in this melting pot that the Gandhis lived and thrived, and where an infant named Mohandas came into the world on October 2, 1869. Tushar Pyarelal ji traces Bapu's ancestry to Lalji Gandhi, who was a Naib Diwan of Porbandar, a sort of right-hand man to the Prime Minister. His son Ramji Gandhi and grandson Rahidas Gandhi succeeded him in the post. Rahidas had two sons, Harjeevan and Daman, who also became the Naib Diwans of Porbandar. And Harjeevan had one son, Uttamchand, who became the father of Karamchand and the grandfather of Mohandas. Uttamchand was the first to become Prime Minister of Porbandar, and I want to begin our story with him. What was he like? And there was one incident when he was very young that endeared him to Rana Khimoji and which showed his mettle.
Uh, Ashraf, about Uttam Chand, there's very less known, but what is known was that he was a very upright kind of a person, and also when you read between the lines, it feels as if he was an ambitious young man who wanted to prove himself and make a place for himself. And this incident that you referred to happened when his uncle, who was the actual who held the post, was away, and Uttam, or as he came to be known, Ota Bapa. In Kathiawad, there was always this tradition that names were shortened or nicknames according to popular usage were added to. So Uttam Chand became Ota Bapa or Uta Bapa. And he used to be like the understudy for his uncle. And a summons came from the Darbar saying the Rana wants to consult with the uncle immediately. And so Uttam went. And there used to be this tradition of a costume to be worn in the Darbar. So his uncle's costume was hanging from the peg at home. So Uttam dressed in that and just walked into the Darbar. I'm sure it must have caused some consternation, and then Rana might have also been a bit annoyed that, I summoned the guy and this understudy has come and things. And it was a vexatious problem because Kathiawad was well known for its traditional political disputes, and almost every principality had some border dispute with the neighboring things, because so many times, someone would become the sovereign and somebody would become the vassal, and then it would turn around and all that. And so borders, disputes, and who holds sovereignty and all that would matter. And so Kathiawad had two ongoing disputes with its neighbors. And one of the regions was a very arid region. And that particular year, the minor prince had not given the sufficient tax amount to the Porbandar. He had claimed that, this territory is not yours, it's mine and all that. So the ruler threw a tantrum and he said, I want this resolved, I want that guy punished and things. So he said, now you are over there, go and do the work, kind of thing. And Uttam considered that as his opportunity to show his mettle. And he not only went and convinced the other ruler, but he worked out a formula by which they did a swap of territories. And initially, they thought that he'd got the short end of the stick, because the territories he got for Porbandar were insignificant. Those days, it wasn't the landmass, but how much it could earn for the ruler. And they were all arid zones and things. I don't know how he managed to do that, or how did he have that foresight. But within 2 or 3 decades, a whole system of irrigation canals and things was built over there, and a whole irrigation system was put in. And what was considered to be arid, fallow land became a gold mine and earned fantastic revenues for Porbandar. So finally, he got a fantastic deal for the Porbandar thing. Of course, the prince, who generally was an unpad, didn't understand much. And he said, we got a bigger piece of land. We gave a smaller piece of land. That's fine. Good for me. And he said, this young man seems to be very dynamic. And he says, okay, you're going to replace your uncle, kind of thing. And from there, Uttam Chand works his way into the office of the Diwan, Till then, although they were Naib Divans, they were mostly given charge of border tax collectors. Because one thing that we must remember is Porbandar was a major trading post in the Kathiawad. The only rival was in Surat. And much of the trade with the Middle East and East Africa happened from Porbandar. So there was a lot of revenue coming in and things. So it gave rise to two industries. One was the port things, shipbuilding as you referred to. The other was Dakat. Because North India, caravans that came from North India to send their goods out to export were easy prey to be looted. Most of the princes of the Kathiawad region were like their ancestors were bandits who would loot caravans and things, and slowly, they eked out territories and said, the looting rights in this territory is mine, kind of thing. And from there, they said, okay, now, nothing happens without my permission or my desire. So this is my kingdom. And that's how Saurashtra. There were hundreds of princely states. Sau means 100.
Right.
And Rashtra means kingdoms. And that's where one of the names of Kathiawad came about. So setting up a system of governance and things used to be very difficult. And Uttam Chand showed that knack on diplomacy to tame the Wild West of India and make it into a very business-like state, the revenues. There's a mention about it that from being in the British Raj, that was the time when the British Raj had just come in and the systems were changing. The British Raj had a scale of grading the princes, of who got importance, and only 3 princes in India were treated on par with the British royal family. Everybody else had a grading system, and some of them would be, okay, they're just princes, they'll get their title and things. Apart from that, they're nothing. They would sit in the back row when the darbar happened and all that. So Porbandar, because of Uttam Chand, moved from the back row to the 3rd row in hierarchy. So these were very significant things for the princes, because suddenly he's become an important. Now when he goes to the darbar, he gets hailed. When he reaches the capital, they salute him with 1 gun or 2 gun salute and all that. So for them, what else did they want? They wanted their pomp and pageantry. And so Uttam Chand became important.
There's one more incident, Tushar, where Ota Bapa saves the treasurer of the kingdom from the queen's wrath. She had unjustly ordered his death. What exactly happened there, and what was the consequence of it?
There's a bit of a backstory to that, Ashraf. When the ruler of Porbandar was on his deathbed, and from Ota Bapa's time, the ruler had come to rely on him a lot, because he realized here's an efficient and honest prime minister who takes over all the administration of my state and allows me free time to do all my canoodling and partying and fornication and everything. And so he says, okay, you go ahead and do all that. Now it reaches such a stage that for every thing that matters, Ota Bapa is the ruler. And the ruler is just a figurehead. So when he goes on his deathbed, he realizes that he's got a queen who still is loyal to the principality from which she was brought, the daughter of the principal. So what she had the habit was that she would empty out the treasury of Porbandar and send everything to her Maika. The crown prince was a minor boy. So when the end came, the Rana called Ota Bapa and he says, I'm naming you regent. My wife will be the regent, but you have to be the protector of my prince. And you have to ensure that my wife doesn't plunder the treasury. So he gives the keys of the treasury to Uttat Bapa, and he gives an edict saying that anything that has to be taken from the treasury must be agreed upon and confirmed by the seal of Uttam Chand. But the queen is, she wants her say. And one day when Uttam Chand is away on some state matter, she sends an order to the Karbhari. Karbhari is the guy, the treasurer. So she sends an order and says, I want so much gold out of the treasury. And he says, no, I can't give it because I need a clearance from Uttam Chand. So the queen throws a tantrum. And he said, off with his head, kind of thing, and sends her soldiers. So the Karbhari flees and reaches the Gandhi home, where Uttam Chand's wife, unfortunately nobody knows her name, is there with the family. And he says, you got to save me. I'm going to be killed. And she said, okay, my husband isn't there, but this is your sanctuary. You come and be in my house. And Uttam Chand had a personal bodyguard, an Afghan unit of mercenaries who was his personal bodyguard. So she calls for the captain and says, look, this is what it is. We don't know what the queen is going to do, but we have to guard this man. So he says, don't worry. The family and the man will be safe as long as we are standing. So they put a cordon around the house. And the queen comes to know, okay, the Karbhari has sanctuary in the Gandhi home. So she orders her army to set siege to the Gandhi house. And she sends a cannon to threaten the Gandhis. Now, by that time, the British have agents and things in all the princely states, and they are the bosses, actually. So a word is sent. But at that time, the whole of Kathiawad had one agent who used to sit in Rajkot. So some of the courtiers who knew about the queen and Uttam Chand, they send a word to Rajkot by a speedy. We used to have the kind of, those horseback mail system.
It's very reminiscent of the Mongol horseback system, where they had posts at equidistance in all directions, and you could just speed by pony to the whatever post was convenient, jump off your horse, jump onto another horse which was always kept ready, and speed towards your destination.
Yeah, and the other thing was that the Kathiawadi horse was very popular and famous. It still is a very sought out after breed, a sturdy, very high, sturdy steed, and very fast, with great stamina. So they had these staging posts, and they used to cover huge distances within a very short time, kind of thing. So they send a message to the agent in Rajkot, and he sends back the message with a troop of his own. But in the meantime, when Uttam Chand reaches home and comes to know about everything, he sends a message to the queen saying that no, you can't get the money, and the Karbhari is under my protection, and I will not. So she said, okay, then I'll take your head also. And she orders the army unit to attack the Gandhi home. And it is said that the unit fired the cannon, and Uttam Chand, what he does is, there's a central room in the house, so he gathers the whole family and he says, we sit over here, which is the most protected inner sanctum, and they start praying over there. And the army unit fires a cannonball. There's a skirmish with the Pathans, and the captain of the Pathan unit is killed before the British intervene and put a stop to all that. So Uttam Bapa had this relationship with his rulers where he would fall out of grace because of his adamantly ethical practice of work. He wouldn't agree with many of the whims of the Thakurs, as they were called, and defy them. And so he would fall out of grace, and then he would sulk at home. He wouldn't go to the darbar, and then the Thakur would end up in a mess. So he would come back and say, "Oh, please come back and take charge," and all that. So that happened. So this was a watershed event, which is historically noted. But there were other times also when he fell out of favor with the Thakurs, and the way we got our name was also one of these incidents that happened. We come from a town next doors to Porbandar. The town of our origin is next doors to Porbandar, which falls in the Junagadh principality. And after one of the spats with the Thakur Porbandar, Uttabapa quits his service and goes away and settles down in our hometown. And to make ends meet, he starts a business of groceries, a grocery shop. And that's where we became Gandhis, because in Gujarat, in Gujarati, a greengrocer or a grocer, a person who sells groceries, becomes is known as the Gandhi. They'll say Gandhi ne tyaanthi lai aao, meaning go to the grocer and buy your stuff. So we became known as Gandhis because of that trade. For that interlude when Uttabapa from Prime Minister became a shopkeeper kind of thing. And so these kind of incidents kept happening, and the fact was that very soon after falling out or firing Uttabapa, the ruler realized that he's in a soup now, and so he would come back and reinstate him. And after a lot of manaving and things, Uttabapa will say, okay, but you now have to behave yourself. And then he would go back again. And that trait continued with Karamchand Bapa also.
I was about to say that. I think it's stubbornness seems to be a genetic thing.
Very genetic thing. There is a saying in Kathiawad, which used to be very prevalent before, where they would say, Kaba na kar. Kaba Nakar means don't do the Kaba. Now, Karamchand Bapa was known as Kaba Gandhi. So, when somebody was being very adamant or somebody was throwing a tantrum, they would say Kaba Nakar. Don't behave like Kaba Gandhi. Kind of thing. So, we went into that colloquial folklore also.
But Tushar, tell us also about the Vaishnavism that the Gandhis followed. There's also Ramanand, whose religious revivalism produced a saint like Tulsidas, who wrote the Ramcharitmanas.
Yeah, this is also part of the immigration that happened from the north. And so the Vaishyas, a sect of the Vaishyas, also went there and carried their religion over there. Now, Saurashtra, you must remember, is like a melting pot. You mentioned the Yadavs who went there from Krishna's time. There is a community of Mayors. Mayors are a very distinct kind of race in the Kathiawad, and they were generally the rulers. Many of the rulers were from that community of Kshatriyas. But they also have a distinctly Greek blood in them, and it is claimed that they descend from some of the Greek soldiers of Alexander who didn't go back with Alexander, who settled down and then slowly migrated from the north towards the south and set up their own communities. And it is believed that the Mayors are descendants from some. So there is a Greek, and even today, when you look at Mayors, you will find a lot of Greek features there: eyes, complexion, things like that, built of this. Thing. So Kathiawad was always a melting pot. Then you talked about the Muslim invasions and the Arab invasions into it. So that left. Then because of the port in Porbandar, there was a lot of trade happening. So that influence also came in. And so many of the families were brought up in this mixed kind of a culture where everything was happening. Gandhis were very Vaishnav in their traditions and upbringing. So a very conservative family where all the Vaishnava practices were followed, going to the temples and things. But in Karamchand Bapa's time, Putliba, his fourth wife, she brings in the Pranami influence into the family, where this Pranami sect is a very orthodox Hindu sect, but it's a very secular Hindu state where all religious influences are allowed to happen, and their prayers are mixed from Gita and Puran and Quran and everything, all religious texts and things. And so that influence also comes into the Gandhi family. So it was like a melting pot in the family. And there is a lot of international influence also happening because of the trade that happens, and because they were from the mercantile community. They would be exposed to the traders and merchants and things coming in from all over the Levant and the East Africa and Middle East and all that.
Yeah. And what was Karamchand Bapa like?
He also was,
By the way, he actually also became prime minister, didn't he?
yes, the tradition continued with Karamchand Bapa. And he became the Prime Minister of Porbandar. And the tradition of falling out with the ruler also continued with him. And so he also was like in the court, and then he would quit and he would go back. And he also went, he left Porbandar and went away and things. With Uttam Chand, there is another very interesting story about his falling out with the ruler of Porbandar, kind of thing. When I told you about the time when he was in as a merchant, working as a grocer, the Nawab of Junagadh came to know about it, and he knew that this guy is a very capable person, because the initial story that I told you about his territorial swap and resolving became very well known in the whole of Kathiawad, and the miracle that he brought about.
And he was very young also.
Yeah, he was very young, kind of thing. The funny thing in that story was that he wore his uncle's borrowed robe, but the ruler was so impressed by the service he gave that he awarded him a new set of darbar clothings of his own before making him the diwan.
Which would have been a big honor in those days.
In those days, it used to be a big honor. So this time, when he fell out with the Thakur and went away, the Nawab of Junagadh heard about it, and he invited him to come over, and he said, "Come to my darbar, and I want to talk to you." So Uttam Chand goes to his darbar, and there's this ceremony of doing saluting the king and all that. So he goes through the whole thing, and he salutes the king with his left hand, the wrong hand. And everybody notices it, and he says, "My God, what is this guy doing?" And the Nawab gets very offended, and he says, "How dare you salute me with your wrong hand," kind of thing. So Uttam Chand tells him, "You see, my right hand is pledged to Porbandar, and if I salute you with that, it would be dishonest. And so, because I honor you, I must be honest with you. And so I cannot give you my right hand, but my left hand is there and is extended in friendship with you, and so I salute you with that." The Junagadh Nawab is so impressed by him that he gives him a decree then and then by awarding a certain amount of land and villages to Uttam Chand Bapa, and says, "This is for your family's upkeep so that you'd never get..." And he issues a decree, like a certificate, saying that the Gandhi family is very loyal to Kathiawad, and I command. Now, Junagadh Nawab is one of the very influential princes of Kathiawad, along with Rajkot and Jamnagar. And so his decree holds influence in major parts of Kathiawad. And he says that, I give an assurance that the Gandhis will never do anything harmful to Kathiawad. And we must always respect their decision. And I command that everybody respect this and give that authority to the Gandhis, which was a very big thing for that time. They had that notification, and he gave the rights to not pay taxes to the Gandhis in their businesses and everything. Otherwise, the princes made money only from taxes. So he says, no, inke paas se mehsool nahi lena, kind of thing. So all these things were happening. Uttam Chand had done that. After that, Karam Chand grew up, so Uttam Chand Bapa gave him. Uttam Chand Bapa also loved horse riding, which was also inherited by Karam Chand Bapa, and they used to have their favorite horses on which they would go out riding on all their errands and everything. They would go out on those horses. And so all these traditions went from the father to the son.
And Karamchand Bapa also served in Rajkot and Vankaner, keeping up the tradition of serving in other states. And I think there too, that famous righteousness and stubbornness was on display.
Oh yes. There was some thing that happened with the Prince of Porbandar, and Karamchand Bapa left his service, and he took up service with the Prince of the Thakur of Rajkot in his darbar. Now, these rulers were also quite philanderers. They had the glad eye. Especially the Thakur of Rajkot was known that he staked claim to every girl or woman whom he fancied. And he sort of believed that he had the first right over them, kind of thing. And so there was a lot of discontent in the court and thing. And Karamchand Bapa, being an upright person, was very strict about these things. Now, the then Prince of Rajkot was also very addicted to alcohol. So he would keep drinking all the time. Because they had nothing else to do. They had courtiers who took care of the ruling and administration. So they could do all these things. But he had told his guards and his house staff that I must be informed when Karamchand Bapa is visiting me. And if he was in an inebriated state, Karamchand Bapa would be stalled before she reached the ruler. And Karamchand Bapa was also very strict. He kept a very tight control over the treasury. And even the prince was not allowed to just plunder, because every time the treasury was full, the princes would go haywire in spending the money. And so Karamchand Bapa controlled the fiscal policies, and that's where the friction happened the most. But that also ensured that Rajkot prospered as a state, and it became one of the important states of Kathiawad, and they got a higher ranking in the Delhi Darbar, kind of thing. So he knew that I can't do anything without Karamchand Bapa. He had a cousin in Vakaner who was of a similar mind. And so one day he came and said, cousin, I am in bad state. I'm broke. I have no access to any more money, and I don't know what to do. You have to bail me out. And Rajkot had bailed Vakaner out many a times. And he said, look, I can't keep bailing you out like this. So he said, no, but give me your prime minister. Because he is, he's done miracles for you. Let him do the same miracle for me. So the Rajkot prince said, you be careful. That guy is difficult to go on with. He said, I don't have a choice here. I need somebody to do that. So Karamchand Bapa is called, and Karamchand Bapa says, I'll go, no problems. These are my terms and conditions, and my decisions will not be challenged. They will not be overruled. Once I take a decision, it will have to be obeyed, whether it's the prince or whoever it is. Nobody has the authority to overrule me. That guy says, yaar, tum aa jao, kuch bhi chalega. And they agree, there is an agreement. And Karamchand Bapa says, I'll give you 6 months. I am sure that I can set your deficit and everything proper in 6 months' time. So for 6 months, you've got to pay me 40,000 rupees. Huge
Massive
sum
amount in those days.
in those days. And he said, if you do a breach of contract, I walk out with the 40,000. That's a given. That fellow says, you want whatever you want. Because he knows na, कि 40,000 भी earn करेगा करमचंद तो ही देने का है. He doesn't have the money. So he said, I'll agree with everything. He signs the agreement and all that. And Karamchand Bapa goes to Wakaner. He sets everything right. He sets up. The biggest threat to the treasury and the economy was the Thakur himself.
Yeah.
And as soon as he insulates all that from the Thakur's philandering, things recover automatically. So that's happening. But the Thakur is chaffing now. Now he's seeing that the treasury is filling up and he can't have access
can't
to
have
them.
any fun.
Yeah, I still can't have any fun. So one fine day he overrules Karamchand Bapa. And Karamchand Bapa says, this is breach of contract, I'm leaving. And it's hardly a month or so since Karamchand Bapa took office. So the Thakur thinks that, I can swindle Karamchand Bapa. So he says, here's a purse. You haven't done the whole 6 months. So why you don't have any claim on 40,000 rupees. Here's a purse. Take it. You want to leave? Go. Karamchand Bapa says, no. The contract says, in the event that I walk out, you have to give me 40,000. So you give me 40,000, which is my right, or I don't want this bhik that you're giving. So he says, I'll leave. I'm not bothered about the money you're not giving me. I'll leave. Then that fellow panics. कि यार अगर चला गया तो वापस लफड़ा.
Back to square one.
Square one. So he rushes after him and he pleads with him and things. Karamchand Bapa said nothing doing. And he walked out with it.
We must remember this is the ruler
Yeah.
of that place.
Yeah.
Karamchand Baba is unwilling to bend to him
Yeah,
also.
yeah. But there were other instances also. But, there's a funny thing about this. In my lifetime, I discovered that, the former US consulate and the residence of the US Consul General in Mumbai was the big Wakaner Palace in Beach Candy. And I discovered it because there was this consul who had invited me. And he says, do you know that this is the palace of the Wakaner royal family? We've rented it out from them. And it was that time that I had read this book, Jivan Nu Parod, where this incident that I narrated to you had occurred. And I sort of calculated that, Karamchand, 40,000 rupees in Karamchand Bapa's time,
Compounded interest
and everything, in today's time, I said, I can actually lay claim to this whole
What an interesting case to
as my right kind of thing. And then, US consulate moved out of it, and I don't know who, some big industrialist bought that, and it went for about some 100 crores odd kind of thing. And I said, ye to apna paisa hai. So this happened. There was another interesting episode that happened in Rajkot. As I said, the Rajkot prince was a philanderer, and he had sort of established a tradition that all the bahus who came into Rajkot after marriage, they had to spend a night with him before with their husbands. And there was this one family, courtiers, and they brought in a bride for their son, whose beauty was she was known for her beauty all over Kathiawad. And everybody was agog that this family has got that beautiful bahu. So the prince sent a word. He said, she has to come to me first. Now, they were also prestigious people. So they tried to hold off as much as possible. And then they heard from the court that the prince had set up, and he had a deputy who was a rascal. So he would, keep fulfilling all the prince's debauchery and all that to create his own power base. And he used to resent Karamchand Bapa, the authority that he had. So he would plan all this? So he said, "Arey nahi bhejte hain, they're not sending her to you, we'll go and abduct her. She is our property, who's going to..." So they made a plan saying this. And that family, the head of the family came to know about it. Okay, there's going to be an attack on my house and my daughter-in-law is going to be abducted. So he rushed to Karamchand Bapa and he said, "You are the only one who can save us. Nobody else has the ability to do that, and this is my issue." So Karamchand Bapa said, "Don't worry, I'm there, I'll help you." The story goes, and that also was mentioned in Jivan Nu Parod, that the day that plot was to be put in action, Karamchand Bapa told the homeowners, the family head, he said, "You guys all secretly leave from here and I will be in your Haveli." And he goes and sits in the bride's room with a decorative shawl covering him and the whole room housed in darkness kind of thing. And precisely the prince and his henchmen, they attack the house. In those days, it used to be very easy because all these kind of attacks would be blamed on the Bharvatiyas, as the dacoits were known. Bharvatiya means the people who have stepped away from the right, straight path.
Yeah, the people who've gone outside.
Yeah, outside that. So they would be blamed that, Bharvatiya came and attacked and looted and all that. Everybody knew who it was, but they would all say, "Ha ha ha, this is what has happened." So the ruler rushes in and he grabs the person sitting on the bed. And then he discovers that it's Karamchand. And he says, "My God, pakda gaya," kind of thing. And Karamchand grabs him and he says, "Learn to behave yourself. Don't be this way, otherwise I'm leaving," kind of thing. So these kind of things, he never ever cared whether it was his boss, whether it was his prince. He says, "You step off the straight and narrow and I'm going to come down on you as a ton of bricks." And that is where he became very popular with the people, because they knew that with him around, all of us are safe. And that also was the reason that the Gandhis, you got into trouble with the British authority also. Because they had said, "We are not bothered about you. We are bothered only about the welfare of our people and the state. You do something wrong, we'll go against you also." So they started becoming this thing, and the princes also would find opportunities to get even with them, although they knew that they couldn't do anything without them.
Now, Tushar, Putliba. Putliba was Karamchand Bapa's fourth wife and the
Yes.
mother of Mohandas. What was she like and what was her influence on Mohandas?
There was a huge age difference between Karamchand Bapa and Putliba. We don't know much about her origins, but being a fourth wife of an old man, what we assume is that she might have been from a poor family who had to find, a suitor for the girls and things. And so that kind of thing. Karamchand Bapa, the previous wife, some had died. The others had not produced a male heir. And in those days, male heir was supposed to be a necessity, a must kind of thing. And also, Bapu himself wrote that my father was a very lusty kind of a person. Bapu himself
That I
talked
was about to
about
say,
his-
that also seems to be a trait
that also
passed
be
on.
a trait from the Gandhi men.
I'm just wondering if it's still a trait.
Don't ask me such question. This is not about me, Ashraf. It's about my ancestors. So, Putliba becomes the fourth wife, and she gives him 3 sons. One was the last, the fourth child from that union. There were 2 daughters from the previous wives. We know about them, but not much about them. And then there was 2 sons, 1 daughter, and Mohan was the last of the brood of Karamchand. Putliba is supposed to be a very pious kind of woman, very religious, very obedient, very efficient. Being the youngest in the family, she was taking care of the entire joint family. Those days, everybody stayed together and lived together in a joint family. So, Karamchand Bapa's siblings were staying with him. They were all together, and the wife of the eldest would be the person who took care of the house and things. So, in Bapu's autobiography also, they mention about how pious she was, how strict she was about her religious duties. Even Jivannu Parod enumerates all that. And Mohan, being the youngest son, was the apple of her eyes. And so she, he was there all the time with her through his childhood, experiencing all the hardships that she went through, the self sacrifices that she made for her belief and things. She used to do the Chaturmas. The Chaturmas is a very big thing amongst both Jains also have it, and the Vaishnavas also have that practice of it's religious practices and fasting for 4 months of the monsoon and the Shravan, as we call it. She used to be very strict. One of the rituals that she followed was that she would only eat after praying to the sun god. And for that, she had to see the sun and perform her rituals, and only then she would break her fast. And in Kathiawad and especially Porbandar, during the monsoons, there used to be a thick cloud cover. So there would be days when you didn't see the sun. You just had sunlight, but you didn't see the sun. And she would not accept that. She had to see the sun, bright sun, and pray to him. So the children would keep vigil, and Mohan would keep vigil on the terraces of their home. And as soon as there was a break in the cloud and the sun peeped out, he would go rushing to call his mother to come and do the prayers. But if Putliba was busy doing some chores for the family, she would say, no, I have to finish these chores, only then I can go and pray. And sometimes it would happen that by the time she went onto the terrace, the cloud cover was already there and the sun was hidden. And she would say, okay, no, I can't eat. And she would go fasting the whole day. So Mohan, as a child, saw all these things, the rituals, the prayers. He was he used to be scared of almost everything that we could possibly be scared of in his childhood. One of the greatest fears was the fear of darkness.
Yeah, there's an interesting story with that, but hold on to the thought because we'll come to it in a while. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the time when Karamchand Bapa was on his last legs, and with him the era of moral giants ended. People who could through sheer force of character stand up to princes and rulers, people who could conduct statecraft, people who could ensure justice. This was also a time when the British were consolidating their power in India. While we will come to how Karamchand Bapa passed away, describe that time. This is a time of great transformation and change.
Yeah, the British Raj is slowly spreading in India. Kathiawad was a bit insulated from it so far because, the East India Company consolidated itself on the east coast first before moving towards the west. And in any case, Kathiawad was considered to be the lawless land and the arid land and all that. So it wasn't much of a priority till port traffic became popular and essential and strategic. And at that time on the west coast, they had ports, much better ports in Mumbai and in Surat for them to trade, because the Mughal port was Surat. And of course, Bombay had been developed by the Portuguese and then taken over by the British. So Kathiawad was still considered to be not that significant by the British. But the rest of the country there was. And so when 1857 happened,
The mutiny.
The first war of freedom, as it's now being referred to, because although I don't believe it was the first war of independence, because it was basically a war fought by princes for their own territories. There was no nationhood or anything. But that's terminology. We don't have to spend time on that. The build-up to that was happening, but Kathiawad was insulated from it. So even when the mutiny happened, when the uprising happened, Kathiawad would get news of all of it, but it was sort of not touched by it. But influences were coming in. Now, when the East India Company started discovering the threat on the East Coast, they said, let's consolidate inwards and things. There's an interesting corollary. It doesn't have anything to do with our story. But the East India Company had started monopolizing salt from that period onwards. And there was a wall they had built across central India from south to north, insulating the territories of the East India Company from the territories of the Principality. And the only thing that they would be bothered about was if salt was being smuggled across from the princely states into the East India Company territories. And they had actual customs posts where they would be looking only for salt. Like now we look for drugs and gold, they would be looking for salt smuggling. And salt had become that important at that time. Some decades back, a British researcher came and actually traced the ruins of that wall. I had never known about it. Not many people in India knew about it. That there was a wall in central India on those lines. So these kind of things were happening. Slowly the influence was happening. The states in Kathiawad were being taken over. And so the influences of the Diwan were decreasing. But still, the rulers needed traditional administrators. So they were having Diwans and things, who would then become the interlopers between the British agent and their state, kind of thing. And so the roles were changing, but the system was still there. Karamchand Bapa met with an accident. What had happened was that his family had shifted to Porbandar when Mohan was a young kid. And they were living in Porbandar, in Rajkot, where Karamchand Bapa built his own house, which still stands in Rajkot, Kaba Gandhi no Delo. Kaba Gandhi no Delo means the house of Kaba Gandhi. They find a match for Mohan in Porbandar, in Kasturba. Kastur's family is a rich merchant family of Porbandar. Her father is, in those days, known as the Nagar Seth, which would, in loose terms, come to be translated as the mayor of the city or the merchant prince of the city. He has a huge business of trading with the Middle East and Africa. He's a merchant banker who has this system of international hundis. In those days, credit notes, which traders would carry, and it was honored right up to Eden and Zanzibar. So he had ships that were doing coastal trade around India. So he had offices in Bombay, Cochin, Madras, Calcutta, all over, and his ships would ply doing coastal trade and all that. So he was a very prosperous person. Now, young Mohan, had had the misfortune of two of his previous fiancées dying on him after being engaged. And so there was a desperation that, we need to find him a suitable mate. Because
there would also have been some superstition, I'm sure, attached. Bad luck.
Yeah, bad luck thing. We had to break the bad luck and all that. And so they find... And in Porbandar, the two families lived in the same neighborhood, almost hailing distance from each other. So in their childhood, they might have played together also. Kastur, although was 6 months older than Mohan, it was considered to be okay. They didn't make a big fuss about it. And so they were betrothed. And after that betrothal, little. At 7, Kastur and Mohan were 7 years old when they were engaged to each other. In our terms, it is called Gordhana, where the two families meet and share a concoction made of jaggery and coriander seeds, and they gift each other that in a. It says Goldhana Karya, means we got engaged. The couple got engaged, kind of thing. We finalized the relationship. And then they go back to Rajkot. And then when they're 13, when Kastur is on the threshold of puberty, they consolidate the wedding. Now the whole family is going to Porbandar. At the last minute, the Thakur sends word saying, no, Karamchand Bapa cannot go, I need him. There's important state work to be done. And so he holds Karamchand Bapa back. And here, everything is set. Those days, Murat and everything was very strictly adhered to. And every ritual had a Murat which had to be obeyed and things. And so Putliba takes charge and performs the initial rituals, because she keeps getting word that I'm still stuck in court. And then the day of the marriage is coming up. And the Prince of Porbandar is also going to attend the marriage, because his former Diwan, his son, with the family, they've had generational relationships. So he's going to come, and there's no sign of Karamchand Bapa. And at the 11th hour, the Thakur of Rajkot releases him and says, okay, you go. And Karamchand Bapa says, how will I reach? So he says, I'm going to give you the fastest pair of bullocks to pull your chart. They used to breed these bullocks for speed, because bullocks were much more strong and had a lot of stamina, more than the horses. So he says, my best driver, my best pair of bullocks and cart I'm giving you. You race over there. And in the race to reach his son's wedding in time, they meet with an accident and he's thrown off the cart and he's grievously injured. But he gets up and manages to reach the family just in time for the wedding of his son. And from that time onwards, he is like almost bedridden, because his injuries are severe, and then they just keep multiplying. The ailments keep multiplying and things. And so that is also a time when the Gandhi fortunes plummet. Because although there was an official post, there is no salary structure or anything. The ruler will, on the need and his goodwill, give money from time to time to the family. And the rest of it is all taken care of by the status and the goodwill that they earn. So when he is bedridden, the money dries up and things. But still, he keeps coming to Karamchand Bapa in times of need. So every time there is a time of need, he'll come with a purse of coins to give to Karamchand Bapa, kind of thing. And so that is where Bapu, Mohan, also develops this sense of responsibility for his father. And he takes it upon himself to nurse his father, because he says, mother has to take care of the family, she has to do her rituals and everything. I must, and the two elder sons are now forced to work, because the father is not the breadwinner anymore. But they are not qualified, so they get small posts in minor positions in the government as, a police patil or something like that. And that's not sufficient to keep the status of the family, because for all other reasons, they are still the Diwan's family, the senior most courtier.
Yeah.
And so they have to live up to that expectation. So there's a big conflict happening, the public image being kept up, privately all the deprivations happening, and Mohan discovering the responsibility that he has towards his father and serving him and all that. And so that is a time of change for the region, for the state, for the tradition, for the society, as well as for the family.
Absolutely. But Tushar, before we end this episode, I wanted to ask, what was Mohan like initially in those early years as a husband, and what was Kasturba's response to that?
It was tragic and hilarious both, because they didn't know anything about husband and wife. They didn't know anything. Kastur always had this fear, because in her time, she had seen child widows. Many of her friends, some close friends also, had been married off at a very young age. And in those days, it used to be that you're 3 or 4 years old and your betrothal happens, and then you're pledged to that person, and then they wait for the puberty before the wedding actually happens and consummated. But in that interim, if the person dies, you still become a widow. And so she had seen her friends becoming widows without ever being really married and things. So there was an apprehension about that also, and ignorance about what marriage meant. For them, it was you leave your father's house and go into your husband's house, kind of thing. Just change of scenarios. Beyond that, not much was talked about or told to them. The sex was taboo, so nobody spoke about that. So neither of them knew actually what it meant to be a husband or what it meant to be a wife. What it meant to be a wife to Kastur was that I have to, like I used to work with my mother in my house, I have to now work with my mother-in-law in my husband's house. So the attachment would be more to the mother-in-law than to the husband, kind of thing. And to Bapu Mohan, the only thing was all the exciting things he heard from his friends about how husbands were and what pleasures they were entitled to and all those kind of things. And so there was a lot of myth and things about being a husband. So initially he was a harsh husband to be with, who himself didn't know what a husband was. So he actually goes and buys a manual from the shop, from the bazaar.
There used to be a manual on how to be a husband.
Yeah, how to be a husband. And he would actually sit and read lessons and then try them out on Kastur. He writes about it in his autobiography and things. So, a person, you can imagine if he goes and buys a book to learn on how to be a husband.
Yeah, he was a child.
Yeah, he was a child of 13 at that time. And so there's a lot of experimenting happening. The title of his autobiography has a lot of it on his childhood and youth, where for everything he needs to experiment and discover for himself what is right and what is wrong. And so it's a very interesting phase in their life together. And if you read his autobiography, you realize that at one point of time, although he didn't accept it readily, he acknowledges the fact that Kastur was the more mature and understanding partner in the relationship than he was, and many a times she taught him, without actually teaching a lesson, she taught him a lot about relationships and life and taking responsibilities and things, which I think must have been, is a very admirable thing for a man to acknowledge in that age and time.
With this, we come to the end of the first part of this All Indians Matter in-depth series, Gandhi at the Beginning. Tushar, thanks so much for being part of it.
Thank you, Ashraf. It was interesting reminiscing about my ancestors and the region I come from.
We continue the story in the second part, in which we discuss Gandhi's adolescence. If you liked what you heard, please follow this podcast and share this episode with your friends and family.